this week's current event is actually about Xinjiang, China, and there is being a ban placed on imports coming from this region, such as apparel, hair products, tech goods, and certain other companies that are in this area. The reason for this is that there are forced labor camps with the Uyghur Muslim population. Now, this is an issue for us as Americans as well. It is not only an issue for this region of China or for Muslims, it is also part of our culture because we get many things from this area, and we do not want to be supporting forced labor camps where these Muslims are forced to eat pork, take part in drinking alcohol, and many other things. The working conditions are horrible, and the things that they're being forced to partake in are strictly against their religion. So it is not something that we would like to support. One major area that we are stopping these things coming from is a county called Lop County, and that is where many of these forced labor camps are from. Now, this does stop short of things like tomato and cotton, but all the other things still are on a strict ban, and the only way that we can get these things in from this area are from companies that are not involved in the forced labor and that have strict proof that they are not involved in forced labor. Now, many other brands have still decided to change where their imports are coming from, regardless of if they are actually coming from forced labor camps, just to avoid the bad press and people deciding to boycott them, regardless of if they were coming from a forced labor camp. HP, Google, Lenovo, those are some big time companies that are actually involved in the boycott of things from this area, which that is a big stance because all of those companies are major companies and they all play a big part in American society. Now, one thing that is a major no-no and cost to this is that a lot of places were actually in the dark about how their products were being produced, which leads to companies not knowing that there were forced labor camps and that's where their things were coming from, that they were making or deciding to export to customers. Now, this ends up happening in a way that is kind of hard to understand as an American in society because our things don't quite work this way. But for an example of how it would be like a job sourcing place. So basically in this region, there would be job sourcing and they will bring these people in, tell them they'll give them a job, and then they end up in these forced labor camps. And that is how people go in the dark and end up in these places. Now, the reason I decided to choose this article is because I believe it plays a huge role in our importation from this region and also in our economic status, because with us having to change sources that cost money, also with us having to change places where we're sourcing from, that could cause expense because usually we were sourcing from a certain area for economic reasons. So now that companies are deciding to change where they're sourcing from, this costs more money and time. It also costs, finding new workers and jobs and locations for them to source out of. Now, overall, this doesn't just affect us as Americans, this also affects China as well. This affects people that are in that territory that aren't having forced labor camps, but their businesses are still taking a big hit from other people moving to different locations, such as like Indonesia or Pakistan. So that is something else to note, that we are not the only ones taking this hit, but also some businesses will be taking the hit that aren't involved in this. But if we also continue to buy these products from this region and don't put up a ban, we could be buying from places that are having forced labor, and we do not want to support that, because if we keep supporting it, then it will just continue to happen and continue to get worse. Now, my first question that I would like to ask you guys is that if you were the person in charge of this, would you decide to place a ban on things coming from this area, or would you decide to let things keep coming from this area because of economic reasons? My second question would be that if you were a company that was sourcing your things from this area in China, would you decide to move your company's location to a different region where you're sourcing, or would you, to avoid scandal, or would you decide to keep it there because of economic reasons? My third question would be, if you were a company in this region of China, would you decide to try to find ways to prove that your company was not involved in this forced labor to keep business constant, or showing that you are acting ethically, or would you just leave it alone? What would be your choices?